Adam Nash is an innovator, community builder, and disruptor in the tech space of fintech or financial technology. After spending years with well-known tech companies such as Apple, eBay, LinkedIn, and Acorn, Adam is now using his significant talents to fuel charitable savings and giving through donor-advised funds, also known as DAFs, a type of charitable savings account long used by traditional philanthropists. Through Adam's creation of Daffy, short for Donor Advised Fund for You, he's bringing the ease of use and convenience of DAFs to a more mainstream audience of uncommon philanthropists like you and me. Let go. Well, Adam Nash, welcome to the Uncommon Philanthropist.
Oh, thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, well, super nice to meet you. I've been working with your team, your amazing team, in the launch of Uncommon Philanthropist, and they truly have been instrumental in getting us to this part. And your technology, your donor advised fund technology, Daffy, truly has been easy to use, as kind of a first time user of the platform. I've found it, user friendly and intuitive, and you guys have just done a great job with getting it going. So really, really great work on that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's early days. We just celebrated our third birthday at Daffy, but it's been really exciting to see how much desire people have to give and to find ways to give back, and how much they'll do if you just give them modern tools and a platform to do it. It's just been incredibly rewarding, I think, for everyone on the team.
Yeah, well, I am a consultant with nonprofits, and I know about donor advised funds, but I'm really surprised at how many people aren't really aware of what it is or what they are, and we're going to get into that a little bit later. But first of all, you are the co-founder and CEO of Daffy, a modern donor-advised fund that makes charitable giving easy and fun. So before we kind of get into all that, I would love to know a little bit about your background.
My background is not that unusual for Silicon Valley, although Silicon Valley is somewhat unusual, so maybe that doesn't say very much. But I actually grew up here in Silicon Valley and studied as an engineer, focused on computer science, went on to get a business degree, but have always been really passionate about this idea that technology is a means to an end. It's what we do with it. And so using technology to, new technology to go after old problems has been something I've dedicated a lot of my career to. Especially around making technology easier to use, right, and more accessible. And so I started my career at Apple, but, if you went through my list of companies I've worked at, they're companies you're probably familiar with, eBay. I ran product at LinkedIn. I was a CEO of a company called Wealthfront that tried to bring financial advice to people who normally wouldn't have access to a professional financial advisor. But what all these things have in common is that I care about using technology to solve problems for real people. I do care about finance. I teach a class at Stanford. It's become pretty well known. It's called Personal Finance for Engineers. And I've been an active angel investor for a long time now, more than a decade. I'm invested in more than 140 companies. So I'm well known around the Valley. Although I think there's a lot of people who follow me on Twitter just because of my gardening. My garden is fairly well known. A lot of tomatoes and a lot of different things. But yeah, I think if a lot of my career is actually, I've been fortunate to be born in a time where, someone like me who had kind of a very math-oriented background, focused on engineering, didn't just go out to get your average role, your average job, but grew up in an area where you can actually build companies, build organizations, build new platforms that didn't exist before. And Daffy's been a bit of a dream for me because I've always cared about this basic idea of helping people give, right? I have 4 children, right? Every parent, teaches their children, it's not all about you, right? Like, it's important to give back. There's people less fortunate than yourself. And it's been incredibly meaningful to take all this technology that's been developed in the last 10, 20 years. And we have so many new products to help people, spend better and save better and invest better. And I love the idea of using all that technology to help people give and to be more generous.
Yeah, that's so cool. Well, and just checking out your LinkedIn background, a lot of people talked about what a great leader you are, how smart, how strategic, but then they talked about what a personable, relational, fun guy you are. And I think that's such a powerful combination. And when I think of tech people, I don't really think of both of those coexisting. So have you always kind of been that way? Had kind of the right brain and the left brain going on?
Oh, it's very flattering. It's funny when you say these things. I think that, it all depends on who you hang out with. So I think at best, I usually have it on my profile that I'm slightly amusing. Like I'm clearly trying, but not professional caliber. But no, I appreciate those kind words. I mean, the truth is I've been very fortunate. Most of my career has been working with very talented, very good people who want to make a difference with what they do. And I know that not every company is like that and not every technology platform is like that, but I've had very good fortune in my career of working with great people. And I think there's a lot to, I typically describe software as a team sport, right? People come in with different skills, different capabilities. I grew up in California, so obviously played volleyball in high school, but I like team sports. I like the idea of everyone working together, et cetera. And when you look at what makes a company or builds these platforms that we all use, all these products that we use every day, they're not just technology. They came from people, right? There were fantastic people who knew how to tell the story. There are people who designed the product, people who actually built it, people who tested it, and people who work with customers to use it. There's all these different skills required. And so I think the reason I've had the success that I've had in my career is because it turns out that software really is about people. And it turns out I really love working with people. One of the biggest drivers of my career, and I think one of the reasons I followed the path that I did, is I love creating environments where people are able to do some of their best work and are excited about doing that. I mean, we spend a lot of our lives working. Every day we wake up, we leave our families, we spend hours and hours every day, most of the days of the week, building things. And so I happen to feel that providing an environment where that's meaningful to people and they feel like they're not only contributing but elevating themselves is a wonderful thing. And I think that's why I build companies and build products. Very
cool. So what's kind of your go-to advice for up and coming tech leaders?
Well, I have a lot of advice. Not all of it good, but I'll leave it as an exercise to figure out what makes sense. But no, I think, a lot of the advice I have for people coming out in technology these days is there's so much of a rush, I think, out there of people to get out there and be the CEO or be the founder and go do it. But the truth is, most careers are not about the next couple years. We actually are going to be building on ourselves and building products and technology for decades. I usually encourage people who are going out to actually go out and build something, do something, find a company, find an area that inspires you where there's great people and it's on the forefront of technology so that you're learning, and just go build and be useful. I think too many people are shooting for the corner office on day one. I think that social media kind of overemphasize this kind of lifestyles of the rich and famous kind of attitude of, jumping there. But the truth is, in most careers, a lot of what you lean on as you become more senior in career and you rise up in management and leadership are those experiences when you were building, when you were doing, when you were actually making the product, designing the product, selling the product. And so some of the advice I give young people is just not to cut that time in their career short. Not saying doing it forever, like it's great to be ambitious and aspiration, but for a young engineer, a young designer, coming out and actually being part of a great team, doing the work, pushing hard, doing those releases, are experiences you don't get to relive usually as you get further along in your career. I might be influenced though. My parents are both doctors, and in the medical profession, what do you start with? I mean, you do start with education, but you get out there, you see a lot of cases, right? There's nothing that can make up for actually working with real people, with real needs, and learning by doing. And I think a lot of that applies in technology as well.
Yeah, for sure. And it's that building something that is usually the funnest part.
It is, especially for people who are rewarded or feel the reward from the outcome, right? Like building anything in technology is difficult. There are so many small problems you have to solve just to get to one big problem. So many big problems you have to solve to actually generate a product, let alone a product that people are willing to pay for and use and actually does what you intended it to. And so I think for people who get into technology because they love seeing new things get built, not just the process, not just the academic piece, but the actual results, I think there's nothing like it. I still think that one of the great things about software in general is that you don't have to have millions of dollars. You don't have to have a pedigree. You don't have to have anyone's permission. Anyone can sit down at a computer and actually start building something that didn't exist before. I think it's amazingly
Well, I don't know
empowering.
about anyone, Adam.
I'm pretty optimistic about, the courses that I help teach at Stanford, Intro to Computer Science. One of the grounding philosophies of it was to break this idea that there are some people who are good with computers who can take these courses, and then there's people who are not. It turns out that technology is somewhat fundamental to so many things we do. I actually like to think that if you meet people where they are and explain how it works, that actually anyone can become proficient with technology and build. But I am idealistic that way. I am, once again,
Absolutely.
yeah, optimistic.
Okay, well, let's talk about donor-advised funds, or DAFs, and that, hence where the name Daffy came from. If you could just share more about what the fund is and kind of the whole idea of Daffy.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to. And by the way, you picked up on the name. Daffy stands for the Donor Advised Fund for You. I know it's a little on the nose, but if you let an engineer name something, that's what you're going to get. But no, so the idea behind the Daffy was really simple, and it's really merging of two basic insights. One is a really simple one. You mentioned the Donor Advised Fund. The Donor Advised Fund is a wonderful account that's been around for decades, almost 100 years. It goes back to like the 30s, but most people haven't heard of it. But it's basically a tax-free account for giving. So just like we have 401ks and IRAs for retirement, we have 529 plans for college savings. The Donor Advised Fund is a tax-advantaged account for charity, right? You put money aside for charity, you get the tax deduction for doing so. The money is invested tax-free. And then anytime you want to give to an operating charity, just a few taps, the money gets sent out. So it's really a wonderful financial product. But most people haven't heard of it because the existing industry has really focused on the ultra wealthy. And I think there's good reasons why they've done that. But it meant that there was a wide open, there's about 50 to 60 million Americans who give to charity every year. And even though donor advised funds have been growing like crazy, there's now millions of them. There are tens of millions of Americans who've never heard of it. And so we thought by wrapping it in new technology, releasing it, making it easy to use, we could bring the Donor Advised Fund to millions of Americans who care about giving. But the second insight behind Daffy was just that technology can actually help people do things better than they could do without it. There's research that suggests that if you are proactive about your giving, if you set a goal, right, you pre-commit, you end up giving 32% more. And I don't want to get into the academic papers, et cetera, but you see this all over. In my class, I teach behavioral finance, right? The emotions behind money. And it turns out this is true for everything. You and I, as people, we're busy. We have our family, we have friends, we have work, we have all these things going on. It's very hard for us to do those consistent financial tasks that we're supposed to be doing, but we don't. This is why it turns out for a 401k, it's good to have the money just come out of your paycheck, right? Automating your savings is a big deal. It turns out it works for giving too. And so we said at Daffy in the beginning, it was like, wow, what would it mean if Americans are, by the way, one of the most generous countries in the world. Yes. Americans give over $300 billion to charities every year. Actually, as a whole, we give over $500 billion. But individuals, just like you and me, give over $300 billion a year. My co-founder and I had this crazy idea of like, what if that number could be even bigger? Yes. Right? Like if they gave 32% more, that'd be an extra $100 billion a year. What would it mean if there was an extra $1 trillion every decade going to charity? And I know that sounds crazy, but crazier things have happened with building huge technology platforms. I mean, I've had the good fortune of working on these platforms. I mean, when I was at Apple, certainly never imagined that billions of people would have iPhones, or at eBay that millions of people would be making some money selling online, or LinkedIn, people being able to control their careers. And so the idea of like, hey, we could build a platform that helps people be who they want to be as generous as they want to be, and make it very easy to put money aside for charity. I mean, that was basically how Daffy came to be. And so my co-founder and I got together. We had worked together at LinkedIn. He was one of my favorite engineers to work with back in the day, and just got very excited about what we could do here. And so we formed the organization in 2020, and have been building ever since.
Wow. Well, and I think, with more exposure about DAFs and the benefits of charitable giving, more people will be inclined to do so. And did you grow up with talk of philanthropy at your house? Were you encouraged to volunteer and give and serve?
I think like a lot of people, before we wrote a line of code at Daffy, I spent time talking to dozens of people across the country about their giving. And one of the things I learned that was very common between them is almost everyone had a parent, a teacher, a priest, a rabbi, an uncle, a grandparent, someone who taught them that, giving mattered, that it wasn't just a financial task, that it was a better way to live. And so I think I was raised that way too, when I think back to like early days in schools and that sort of thing. I mean, my kids go to a school, has a wonderful tradition, elementary, they're all older now, but when they were young, all the kids on Fridays, they would bring in spare change, and they put that change in a little piggy bank. And then, every quarter they would vote on what local organization to give the money to. And I think actually that also factored into Daffy for me, this idea of like, why do we teach our children to do these things? But as adults, so often we don't do the same things. I mean, being a parent is often very humbling. You start realizing that you're teaching your kids these things, and then you ask this question, like, what about me? Like, am I living that life that I'm teaching my children? And so there's definitely some element to it. I mean, if you think about the basic idea of Daffy, setting a goal for your giving, putting aside a little bit of money every week or every month for charity, it's a very old-fashioned idea, but one that's stood the test of time. It's just nice to see it, and being able to enable it in a modern application is kind of fun.
In building out the platform for Uncommon Philanthropist, I didn't want to organize as a 501c3, as a nonprofit. A lot of what I'm going to do is educating, informing, getting people motivated, getting people connected. But then, I want to be able to raise money. I know this is going to happen time and time again. So I started looking at, like, how am I going to do that? I don't want money coming into my account. And so I was aware of the donor advised funds, and then I saw that you had the option to do the campaigns, and I was like, perfect scenario. So if you can talk a little bit about the idea behind campaigns, and why you built that into Daffy, and how people can go about using those campaigns, like the one I have running for hurricane relief for Asheville, North Carolina.
Yeah, that's a wonderful campaign, by the way. Yeah, campaigns, I think, shows, one of the great things about rebuilding things with modern technology is you can get ideas from anywhere about what to do. And it's actually been very fun. Donor advised funds have been around for a long time, but there's been very little innovation in the category. They're mostly been treated almost like these, like I said, like these tax advantaged accounts, right? You can put money aside for charity, get this tax deduction, and then give later. But at Daffy, we spend time thinking about, like, how do we help people give better, right? That's our whole mission, to help people be more generous more often. And so internet campaigns have been around for a long time, right? Decades. Donor advised funds have been around for a long time. But to our knowledge, no one had thought about this idea of, like, wait, instead of making a donation to a charity from your donor advised fund, you could run a matching campaign. And so on Daffy, we've made it incredibly easy. So you have an account at Daffy. Anyone can set up a campaign. It does not cost extra. It's just one of the features. You can pick up to 6 charities that you want to support. By the way, the donors you bring in get to pick which charity they give to, so a lot of flexibility. And then if you want, you can actually match the donations because you have a donor advised fund. If you want to match dollar for dollar the first $1,000 given to your campaign, you could do it. And so we have a lot of members who get excited about this. They were thinking of making a donation, when obviously most recently with the hurricanes in the Southeast, but even before, previously, we had the fires in Maui. We've had a number of different international events. People care. They want to help. And so what we've discovered is that campaigns are such an easy way to do something that's a little bit more fulfilling than just writing a check yourself. We've actually had donors tell us that they no longer want to make simple donations because they find doing matching campaigns so rewarding, because you do a little bit to get the word out, you do a little bit to select the charities, but it's so rewarding because you feel like every donation that comes in, you helped do that also, right? You helped inspire that. And of course, the research shows that most people, over 85% of donations happen because someone asked, right? So our members seem to love campaigns because it gives them another way to give and inspire other people. For our members who don't run campaigns, they actually love the campaigns because it gives them ideas of what to give to, and it makes it a little easier for them to give. And then, of course, nonprofits love it because in the end, there are a lot of platforms that nonprofits can use to do things like take stock donations or crypto or run campaigns, etc. But a lot of these platforms are very expensive, right? Those fees come out of the money you have to do the work you're doing. And so because we're a donor advised fund, we don't have to charge, there's no fees to the nonprofit, right? When someone comes in and whether they give $100 or $100,000 to the nonprofit, that money goes to the nonprofit. And so we're just finding that campaigns is an exciting innovation that we could bring to the donor advised fund space. And, as it is, it's about a year old now. We ran all these wonderful campaigns last year around food insecurity, for the holidays. Mm-hmm. We had this audacious idea, like, could we raise enough money to feed 100,000 families kind of in the Bay Area? Mm-hmm. But this year I've been blown away. People have been running campaigns for schools, right? Your school wants to put in a new computer lab, or there's a sports program. We've seen memorial campaigns for people who've passed away, or even people like a teacher who's retired, right? What a nice thing to do to raise money kind of in their name for something that they care about. And then, of course, when these crises happens or world events, a lot of people want to get involved and help, and this gives them a way to help. So it's been a really fun area to build and develop, and really inspiring to see what people do with it.
For sure. And I'm sure that with anything, with time and experience and exposure, more money, more awareness is possible. So I'm excited about the potential of generating a whole lot of money together, benefiting all kinds of causes. And, I never really, in envisioning the platform, I really didn't think through disaster recovery. Mm-hmm. And then, boom, it was just right in my backyard in Asheville, North Carolina, a city I love. And I'm like, I'm going now.
Well, I think it's wonderful you're doing it.
Talk about this a lot.
Yeah, one of the patterns that we've definitely seen is that when you inspire people with these campaigns, you don't only inspire them to give, it gets them thinking when things happen that they might be able to run a campaign. And so it spreads. But we can do this. Like I said, our model makes it easy to support features like this. And then one of the advantages of building this platform from scratch is that building out features that are very common in technology, but less common in philanthropy, is easy for us. And we've actually had a lot of nonprofits reach out to us. They'll tell us that they've had ideas for these features for years, sometimes decades. And they're just so excited to see someone building them and making them accessible. And then, of course, because of our business model, it's very inexpensive, right? We're not charging a giant percentage fee. We don't charge a percentage of assets. It's a simple membership, like a lot of nonprofits that we support.
Mm-hmm. It's so great, Adam. So, question for you from your team.
Sure.
How do DAFs help people give more and could help us close the $1 trillion generosity gap?
Oh, that's a great question. I talked about this a little bit when I talked about the idea behind Daffy. But yes, for sure. So donor advised funds by themselves are not magical. Financial accounts are just financial accounts. I teach this in my class, right? Money is rarely the goal for most people. It's what people want to do with it. It's the things and the people that they care about and that they can support that actually matter. So the real value of the donor advised fund comes from the fact that just having a separate account for something actually means that you're more likely to follow through on it, right? If you have a separate savings account from your checking account, you're more likely to put some money aside to save. If you have a separate retirement account, you're more likely to actually put money aside for retirement and leave it there so that you have it when you need it. It could be saving up money for your kids' college education. Whatever goal you have, having a separate account can be really valuable just in terms of getting people to do the right thing. And the donor advised fund is the same thing, right? Having a separate account where you put money aside for charity, once the money's in there, it can only go to charity. And so, as I mentioned earlier, the research shows that if you pre-commit, if you set a goal for your giving, it turns out people end up giving 32% more. And so having a donor advised fund helps you be the more generous person that you want to be, and it makes it easier. The number of people who actually thank us at Daffy just because at tax time they have all their donation receipts in one place. I know it sounds funny, but people really... We actually did a redesign where we moved that to the front page of our service because people have such anxiety about finding their donation receipts. But the truth is, the real exciting thing is that if all of us did this, right, if we all had an account for charity and we ended up giving 32% more, the numbers say that that would be more than $100 billion a year. And so when we talk about that $1 trillion generosity gap, we talk about this difference over a decade of what Americans give to charity versus actually what they want to give, what they would do if it was a little bit easier, a little bit more obvious. And so we actually think that the Donor Advised Fund can help unlock billions of dollars for charity that hasn't been given before, and actually over a decade, more than $1 trillion. That's the goal. It's good for a startup to have big goals, but there you go.
So where do you, like people that are just getting started who don't have a generosity plan, is there a rule of thumb that you've heard of? Like, where do you even start for someone who's never really thought about it and they're like, I really want to be doing this. There's tax advantages. Any advice you can give people on getting out of the gate on?
You know, the funny thing is the simplest piece of advice is actually just to set a goal for your giving. Right? You know, people are used to having goals for budgets, how much money they're going to save for retirement, or, you know, how much money they can afford for groceries. Like we have budgets. We kind of know that part of having a healthy financial life is just knowing what we can spend on different things. But it's amazing how many of us give to charity and we never actually ask the question, how much do we give? So for a lot of people, I just ask them, how much do you give to charity? Last year, the year before, do you belong to a church or a synagogue? Do you have children in school? Do you give to your alma mater? Give to any causes? For a lot of people, it's just looking at what did you give last year and saying, okay, that feels like a good amount. Maybe it's too low. It's rarely too high, but you know, maybe it's too low. Maybe it's the right number, but just saying, okay, how do you feel about that as your goal? And once you set a goal, I don't care if it's a few $100s, a few $1,000s, it can be even more. And then it's like, well, how are you going to put money aside for it? And so that's usually where people start. In fact, if you download Daffy, that's one of the first questions we ask is, what is your goal? Now, for some people, goals can come from outside sources. You know, like I told you, I spoke to dozens of people about their giving. I wish I could tell you there's some consensus, but everyone has different numbers. You know, some people, very traditional, right? They'll say, no, you should give 10% of your income to charity. Some people say 2.5. Some people say 1. Some people, it's not a percentage at all. Oh, you should give at least this much money to charity every year. For some people, it's a little bit about the fact that in life you have good years and not so good years. And so there's a lot of people who feel like, well, if you've had a good year, you should give back, right? That we all depend on the fact that, you know, in the good years you give a little bit extra because you might not be able to in the not so good years. But whatever system you set up, once you know what your goal is and what you believe about giving, the next step is just to automate it. It's just like savings. It's just like retirement. And you can fund your account in a number of different ways, right? For some people, it just means putting aside a certain amount every month, right? We have members who put aside $25 every month for charity. They give a few $100s to charity every year. Now, of course, if you're an investor and you hold things like mutual funds or ETFs or stocks, let alone crypto, which has been very popular the last few years, it turns out there's a huge tax advantages to actually donating stock and crypto. It turns out not only do you get that charitable deduction, but you never pay the capital gains taxes. And so that's usually for people who work in industries or who are investors and may have had these funds. There's always a lot of anxiety about taxes with investments. It turns out there's a solution. Turns out if you donate it, you never actually have to pay the taxes on it. And that's very hard to do normally because most charities can't take those things.
Right.
But we can. Right. So I remember one of our very first members who came to Daffy right after we launched wanted to give a Bitcoin to their congregation. It was in New York. And they read our press release and said, "Oh, I get it. I give you the Bitcoin and you'll get the money to the charity." And so in some ways, it's just that simple. So different people have different paths to come into the donor advised fund. The best advice I can give people is to just get started. It's free to get started, right? You can go download the app, go to daffy.org. In a few minutes, you have an account set up. Try it out. It's free under $100. If all you want to do is, if you have a charity that you normally give $20 to, $50 to, $100 to, try it. I think for most people, what they find is that actually giving feels good.
Yeah, it does.
Overwhelmingly, when we have people use the app, it's so easy to use. You get, instead of all that problem of figuring out the money piece, all that noise goes away. You have an account. It's like you open it, you have a wallet, and it's for charity. I've had this impact myself too, right? I've literally been walking around, past a table where someone was raising money for charity. And the way it feels, if they inspire you, if you actually love the organization, if you think it's worthy, the ability to pull your phone out of your pocket and actually do something in the moment, it feels good. It feels good for a whole host of reasons. And that was actually part of what we tried to design Daffy to be, was really maximize that feeling you get from giving and minimize all the complexity and noise that comes from money and technology.
Well, I know that with my campaign for hurricane relief, it's like, who are these people that are supporting this campaign? And they're the Daffy community, a lot of them. And I'm just, wow, very, you've created a technology platform, but you've also created community, which is really cool when it comes to this kind of thing.
Well, that is a big part of the vision. Like I said, there are so many people who give every year, and yet it's very hard to find them. It's very hard to find them on social media. It's very hard to find. Not for lack of trying. As someone who was involved with designing and building some of these products, like LinkedIn, we always knew that people would share what's important to them, and giving is important to people. The problem is it's very hard for philanthropy to compete with, news and politics and shopping and dating and all the things that people do online. And so one of the great things about Daffy is it also is a community. It's a focus space for people who've self-selected, right? The only people who are joining Daffy are people who actually care about giving and actually give themselves. And so not only does that mean it makes it a little easier to get inspired on who to give to, with features like campaigns, it means that there is an audience built in there who's looking for opportunities to give. And we're hoping that as we keep growing and build that community larger and larger, it's going to become a bigger and bigger piece of how nonprofits find these communities. Because, as someone who's been on the board of several nonprofits, it's very hard. There are millions of people out there who care about your cause, who would love your organization, but how do you reach them?
Right.
It's one of the big problems. And so we're hoping that Daffy has a role to play in that as well as we grow.
Yeah, super cool. Let's talk a little bit about the tax advantages of a donor advised fund. Not a super deep dive, but if you can just kind of explain how that works. You touched on it a little bit, but help us understand that better.
Sure. It starts with the basics. Going back to the original income tax in the U.S., in 1913, the charitable deduction is one of the best deductions in the tax code, and it's there for a very good reason. Right? There are these organizations who provide public services, public goods. And we wanted, as a society, to make sure it was very easy and even incentivized for people to actually give money to those organizations. And so we don't tax it. And it's a big tax benefit. So cash donations, you can deduct up to 60% of your adjusted gross income in any given year. For donating assets like stocks or crypto, et cetera, it can be up to 30%. So that's a really big number. And so the tax advantages are pretty high because it turns out, as I mentioned earlier, Americans tend to have variable income these days, right? Like none of us earn the same amount I shouldn't say none of us, almost none of us earn the same amount every year, right? There's good years, you get the bonus. Maybe you work for a company that gives you stock. Maybe you got more routes. I mean, it's amazing, but variable income, you have some good years and not so good years. And there's a reality of the fact that taxes are higher in those good years. That's the way our tax system works. And so the benefits of putting money aside for charity in those good years is that not only do you get the tax deduction, but you get the tax deduction when it's the most valuable. Mm-hmm. Then there's a second benefit. When you put money into the donor advised fund, not only do you get the tax deduction, but then the money is invested tax-free, right? So if you give a certain amount to charity every year, putting 2, 3, or 4 times that amount in a donor advised fund means that that money is invested, it's earning returns. Maybe that'll help you fund even more donations in year 5 and year 6. I mean, we have some people who open accounts because they like just donating every year the money that the account makes. And it makes them feel like they can give consistently every year. And so the ability to invest tax-free is really a big benefit. But probably the biggest benefit of all actually comes to people who realize that actually donating cash to charity is good, but actually donating appreciated investments and assets is even better. Like I said, for a lot of people, if you've held stock, I'm in Silicon Valley. There's a lot of people who have Apple stock or Google stock or Nvidia stock, etc. And those stocks have done phenomenally well. But guess what? If you sell that stock, you're going to end up paying quite a bit in taxes, right? Because you bought it at a low price and the government's going to tax you on the capital gain. But when you donate that stock, you never pay the capital gain, right? So if you bought Apple for $10 a share and now it's $100 a share, I actually don't know where Apple is. Maybe it's $200. I don't know where it is. Something very high. Yeah. But the point is, instead of paying taxes on that gain, you can get the full tax deduction for donating those shares of stock, and you never pay the capital gains tax. And so it's better for you from a tax perspective. It's also better for the nonprofit, because remember, the nonprofits are also tax-free. So they get the money tax-free. So they get more money. You have more money to give. And so once people figure this out, they start using the donor advised fund every year as kind of part of their annual process. I mean, we're just about to get into the giving season in November and December. And this is why the season is so big, because it's the end of the year, right? The holidays certainly remind us it's a good time to give and set up the year. But also, it is the end of the tax year, right? It goes January 1st to December 31st. And the IRS is pretty serious about that, as it turns out. And so if you've had a better than average year, the ability to put money aside into your donor advised fund and give yourself the time to decide which charities to give to, for a lot of people, is really what they're looking for. And so I think for all those reasons, donor advised funds have become known as kind of one of the best tax advantaged accounts that you can have.
Yeah, and coming from the nonprofit side, which I've worked with a number of nonprofits, I believe that the statistic is like over 30% of donations are made during December. And the majority of those are made at the very end of the year to get that tax benefit. So nonprofits, of course, they are very glad to get that money. But if you're more strategic and planned in your giving, so that you're doing like monthly donations, that's really a great benefit for the nonprofit to have that revenue coming in throughout the year, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Instead of that influx at the end. I think it just helps you be a better steward of the resources.
Oh, absolutely. And we actually see those behaviors at Daffy, and we see both of them. By the way, our members who have donor advised funds do give a lot in November and December. I don't think it's all tax motivation. Like, we see donations spike tremendously, 200, 300, 400%, amazing surges. We're already seeing it. It's only October. We're already seeing the growth happen. But at the same time, you're 100% correct. A lot of nonprofit organizations that we've spoken to are really putting an emphasis on ongoing funding, right? I know it sounds counterintuitive, but for a lot of nonprofits, it is better to get $100 every year than to get $1,000 once and never see that person again. right?
Exactly.
And that's for two reasons. One is
True.
these nonprofits have operating responsibilities, right? They pay people, they offer services, they do what they do, and they want to do that every year. And so it's really hard for nonprofits when they have to raise all that money every single year. And so donor advised funds make it very easy to set up recurring donations. And so as more and more nonprofits have realized that, they've been coming to us and saying, hey, how do we promote this idea of giving regularly, giving us money every year or every quarter or every month, rather than trying to fish for one big donation? And then, of course, the second reason is actually more about people. I mean, in the end, people are more than just donors, right? Most nonprofits are looking for volunteers. They're looking for board members.
Exactly.
They have events that they need to fill with people. And so they're looking for those ongoing relationships. And I think what's happening in the nonprofit world is they're realizing more and more that donor advised funds are not some other nonprofit that's raising money in opposition to them, but they're actually helping them build those relationships and raise more money more consistently. We just had a big day, the DAF Day, that was thrown for the first time this year. And it was just really wonderful to see all these nonprofits realizing, wow, you've got this population of people who care about giving so much that they've put money aside in a separate account for charity. That's a great audience for your cause, for your mission. That is a great group to reach out to when you're raising money or when you're just trying to raise awareness. And so I think we're going to see a lot more of that in the coming years as DAFs continue to grow at this rapid rate.
Yeah. Well, and I love to be able to be having these conversations about charity, about giving, because people that aren't exposed to it, and I'm hearing this kind of a lot, there is some skepticism about nonprofit organizations, and are they going to, be good stewards of the money that I give them? And my experience that most nonprofits are run with a very high level of integrity. You have very committed people who are working for not a whole lot of money, and just really there for the cause. Have you found that to be true and kind of really getting engaged with a lot of nonprofits? That's kind of the spirit of nonprofits.
I do, and I think I hear that a lot from members. I mean, this question, the truth is there's over 1.5 million nonprofits in the U.S. alone. I'm not even going to go into global numbers. And so it is a hard problem, right? People, we all have limited resources, limited dollars. We care about things. We want to give them to the organizations that are going to have the most impact, right? Whether it's on our community or whether it's on a cause. And so I understand that that question and then that desire. I do feel like sometimes nonprofits are held to an unfair bar. People spend a lot of money buying things at, Walmart and Target and Costco, et cetera, without asking the same level of questions about the companies that make every single product. And I've watched some incredibly inspired people who really give it their all working for a nonprofit have to just answer a litany of questions about how much they're paid or, prove to me that you're doing good. It can be a lot sometimes, but this is why actually I think communities like Daffy can be so valuable, right? It turns out it is a hard problem. Sites like Daffy, we, from a regulatory standpoint, we have to vet every charity on our platform to make sure that they have their IRS credentials. They actually are an accredited, charity that can get deductions to get gifts. And we use third-party services to evaluate them. We provide that to our members, etc. But in some ways, a lot of the value I think that we're bringing to the community is actually you can see what other people are giving, right? You can always choose to give anonymously, but if you make a public donation on Daffy, we actually ask people, are you willing to leave a public comment about why you give to this organization? And I know that content on the internet, not always perfect, but some of these notes that people leave are just phenomenal, right? They'll say things like, oh, I give to this organization every year on the anniversary of my father's passing. They were so supportive of him through that. Or they talk about how, their parents gave to this organization and belong to this community center, and they do, and they're raising their children to belong to it too. And so one of the things I think we can do in the community is if we get more people talking about why they give, I think it'll take a little bit of this pressure off nonprofits to kind of vet every number and this skepticism out there and get people back to what we're really trying to do, which is that you have people and organizations dedicated, for the most part, to helping people. Let's support them. Let's help them have more of an impact. And so I think there's a lot we can do by pulling communities together to kind of help nonprofits reach people, and people feel better about the nonprofits that they're giving to.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And you touched on a little bit. So the money that goes into a DAF account, it's not just sitting there like in a low interest savings account, right?
It turns out there's a lot of donor advised funds around the country, mostly local community funds, et cetera, a few national ones. They all have different options, but with Daffy, the money is invested tax free. We actually have 15 pre-built portfolios. If you want to see the money invested in something conservative like a cash account or bonds, you can do that. Actually, some people like that idea. They don't want the money at risk, right? It's for charity. There's other people who actually like the idea of the money growing, right? If it grows, you'll have more money to give to charity. And so we have ETF portfolios from Vanguard. We have ESG portfolios from BlackRock. We even have crypto for people who care about that. But whatever the right portfolio is for your giving strategy, how you think about things, one of the big advantages of the donor advised fund is that the money you put in there does not sit idle. And actually, when you have years like this year, I've had a lot of Daffy members tell me that this year they've given more money than they've ever given before, and their account is still larger. Because the stock market and the crypto markets have been so generous this year with returns. It really is a powerful feeling. And like I said, for us, the reason we build that into the platform is, once again, anything that inspires people to give more is fantastic, And so we didn't want people to feel like they were somehow taking money out of investments that could have a good return to put it aside for charity. We wanted them to know that this money is not just working for you, but it's working for the causes and organizations you'll eventually support.
Such a great thing. So we talk a lot about serving here at the Uncommon Philanthropist, and the workplace is a great place to be serving one another. In what ways have you seen philanthropy fostered at work?
Well, obviously, working at a place like Daffy, it see a little bit more than a typical organization. I think that everyone who joins Daffy has a passion for giving, a passion for helping people. And so we do a number of things around the office. We volunteered last year at a food bank because we were running the big campaign. Obviously, Daffy employees will run campaigns themselves. We also do a lot here. A lot of what we do at Daffy is just amplify what our members are doing, right? So we'll reach out to members who are looking to make a difference or looking to have impact. Sometimes they have a campaign, we can help amplify it. Sometimes it's actually as simple as helping connect people who are looking to do something, right? So sometimes it's as simple as getting people to put more money aside for charity. So we have members on the team who will talk to people about the tax advantages of giving. We've had people put aside millions, in some case tens of millions of dollars in stock, right? They were lucky enough to have a great investment, or they had a company and they want to put some percentage of that money aside for charity. And so the way to have impact is just to let them know that that's not only something they can do, it's something they should do. And that frees up more money for these causes. And so there's a lot of different ways that people have impact. My favorite product, of course, turns out to be Daffy for Families. I know this sounds obvious because, what technology product these days doesn't have a family plan, right? I'm a parent of four children. The number of Amazon teen requests I get, and Xbox requests, and iTunes requests, and everyone's requesting. It's great. But it turns out donor advised funds, most donor advised funds are set up like bank accounts. You want an individual account or a joint account. At Daffy, you can add up to 24 members of your family to your account. We see a lot of people adding their parents. They add their siblings, nieces and nephews, grandchildren. And so the way it works is that you and your partner, the organizers, you still control the fund, but anyone on the account can see the donations that you make, and anyone on the account can make a recommendation for a donation. And I'll just tell you, it's a wonderful experience. One day I came home for dinner, family dinner, sitting down, and my 17-year-old was like, how long have we given to the Monterey Bay Aquarium? That's wonderful. When we haven't gone this year, we should go. And so that's a local charity that we like to support for a number of reasons. But to see my 17-year-old actually ask about it was something unusual and special. And I guess it just goes to the fact that in modern times, very hard to get teens to talk, as it turns out. Although they sometimes will talk if you're the driver, you don't exist, and they'll just talk in the back and that sort of thing.
I remember those days.
Parenting trick, yeah, that sort of thing. But it turns out if you get a notification on their device, they will talk about it. And so I think that things like Daffy for Families are things that a lot of our employees and a lot of our engineers and designers get inspired by, right? Enabling more people, not just to give, but to talk about giving, be aware about their giving, be intentional about their giving. So that's a lot of what we focus on here.
Yeah. And I mean, just thinking about the technology of all of that money coming in and going out, I mean, it must be such a robust platform to be able to figure all of that out. So,
well, we wouldn't have been able to do it, I think, even 10 years ago, 15. I mean, technology has really moved quickly, but you're always standing on the shoulders of giants. In our case, the last 10 to 15 years in Silicon Valley, there have been so many new financial services and products. I mean, obviously, I was the CEO of Wealthfront. I was on the board of a company called Acorns. Acorns, this simple app, started with helping people save their spare change. Now has millions of people living better financial lives because of this simple app. But I mean, there's been so many of these new apps and services, and as a result, the technology to handle linking your bank account, entering a debit card. I mean, we take Apple Pay, right? Even fancy things like transferring stocks or mutual funds or ETFs or something even as novel as crypto. 10, 15 years ago, that would have been a lot of custom work. It would have taken a very large team to build out that technology. Now we don't have to build out that technology. There are companies like Stripe that handle a lot of the cash payment for us. There's companies that handle the stock. There's companies like Coinbase that handle the crypto. And so I think the most unique thing that we're doing is that we're taking all that technology and applying it to giving. Yes. And unfortunately, there aren't as many companies doing that. But it is amazing to see something built to scale. I mean, Wealthfront, I remember when it started, people were doubting how much money would people really trust to a computer to manage. I think they just announced that they have, over 70 billion in assets from almost 1 million customers. And so when I see that done for investing, when I see companies like Acorns doing that for millions of people, I see companies like Robinhood doing it for tens of millions of people, it gets me excited about what we'll be able to do for giving in the long term. Wouldn't it be amazing to have a site where millions of people were discussing and debating and supporting the causes and organizations that are meaningful to them? I get very excited about that idea.
And I was interviewing another woman who's a philanthropic advisor, and we were talking about how generosity, it's a gift. It's, the money that you give to somebody is a gift, but what you get back in return, it's hard to put it into words. What you get back when you make a decision to be strategic with your generosity and when you give. And Elizabeth Burdett was talking to me about the epidemic of loneliness, the Surgeon General, his report. And one of the things he put in there was volunteering and serving, getting us out of our basements, off of our phones, and in community with people, how that's really, that's something we can do to kind of move to a more connected, less isolated world that we live in now.
Well, listen, I think it's always been true that getting out and actually connecting with, working with, supporting, helping people ends up being some of the most rewarding experiences that people have. But you're 100% correct that given the last decade, we were so in our phones and so in technology. I mean, even streaming, it's like we took TV, that's sitting on the couch, etc., and now people binge seasons in a row, right? And it's almost like too much of a good thing. Once again, being the parent of children, like sometimes they get access to too much candy. They eat, Halloween, right? It's like, turns out there is such a thing as too much, right? Like it can be too much. And I think that we all have that a little bit on digital overload. But that idea that giving and actually interacting, it's true. Like you can post 100 times on social media. It will never give you the feeling of standing, helping out for 1 hour, helping feed people, putting food in boxes for delivery. There's so many things. There's so many people in our community who need assistance, who need help. And I'm not saying every cause speaks to everyone or every community is the same. But finding those experiences, they're meaningful to you. If you have children, they're meaningful to them. And I think it is important for us to all get reminded that in the end, a lot of what life is about, some would argue all or most of what life is about how we impact and connect with each other. And so I think taking those opportunities to go beyond just giving dollars and actually spending time, it's phenomenal.
Yeah. And just, we research everything. You make a purchase on Amazon and you're reading reviews and you're spending all this time, making a $10 purchase. It's like we need to take that intentionality for finding nonprofits too. It's kind of beginning to do the soul searching about what do I really care about? Where can I make a difference in the world? And opening up the discussion around the dinner table with your kids and family and invite them into the conversation. Yeah. That's really cool stuff. And it's healthy in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. And like I said, technology can make this easier. I mean, everyone got obsessed years ago with those Snapchat streaks. At least I know the kids would get very angry if one of those got broken, that sort of thing. All these things can exist for giving, right? We talked about recurring donations before, but it feels meaningful when you support an organization not just once, but for years, sometimes decades. You feel this connection. You feel like you helped do that. You connected to their mission, etc. And so there are all these wonderful feelings in the real world that come from these interactions. A lot of what we've been trying to do is bring that to more people and actually hopefully inspire and encourage them to kind of reach out beyond their screens and do more. But yeah, I think you're going to see a lot more of those experiences in the coming decade. I don't think this is actually just about giving. I think there's a lot of fatigue about the pure virtual environment that's leading a lot of people to stop talking and arguing about things and wanting to actually do things. And so I'm hopefully this is part of a trend that we'll see more broadly in technology.
Well, that's awesome, Adam. Okay, we're going to wrap up here. We're going to switch it back to you. Okay. What do you want your legacy to be?
Oh, this is going to sound a little old-fashioned, so I apologize, but it's actually something I care about quite a bit. So I come from a world, I've gone to some fantastic schools, worked for amazing organizations with some of the most brilliant people that you could possibly meet. One of the problems that brilliant people have sometimes is they spend so much time thinking about the future, thinking about what could be, is they miss the present. And so for me, I actually spend a lot of time, I know this is not exactly your question.
No, it's
great.
But
I actually try not to think too much about my legacy or what that means and stay a little bit more centered on the people and relationships that I have day to day, week to week. Like, children are only young once. I have my oldest left off for college. You feel it like when they go off, and it's a good thing. That's what you want. That is the goal, is to have them go off, but it still leaves something there. And so, when I think about legacy, I really think that in the end, for most people, the answer is the same. It's going to be the people you touch, the relationships you had, the impact you made on them, and how they remember you. And so I actually try. I'm not always perfect about this, but when I'm at my best, I try and bring that into every day, every week, kind of every year, and make sure that I'm not accidentally over-prioritizing the future at the expense of the people I care about today.
Mm-hmm. That's really good. Okay. Are you ready for the lightning round?
I'm not as fast as I used to be, but I'll do my best.
But I think you've had a peek at the questions, so.
True.
Favorite band or song of all time?
Oh my God. Wait, I missed that one. That is very tricky for me. It's kind of funny. So I'm going to give you not quite the right answer for this. I will tell you, my first concert I ever went to in high school was actually Aerosmith and Guns N' Roses. So if you do push me hard enough, there's probably something from that set that I would probably pin on that evokes something. But the truth is, these days, the music that brings up the best memories are actually stuff from my kids and that sort of thing. Like the right Disney movie, the right soundtrack, the right musical, that actually tends to be the most rewarding for me. But yeah,
put you right here. So that's your non-answer.
I mean, there are video game theme music. I mean, when I hear that Mario theme music, I mean, that's 30 years. That does something for me, and that's turned into something I play with my kids. So maybe I'm going to go with the Mario theme.
Okay. That is awesome. Daily activity that brings you joy.
Oh, it's not quite daily, but there's a lot of people on Twitter who follow me for finance and for tech and startups and that sort of thing. I think there's even more that follow me for my garden. I really love it. There's something very rewarding to me about the garden. It's a little bit of delayed gratification, right? You have to do things today that don't pay off for a while, but not so far in the future that you don't feel results now. It's wonderful with the kids, and I just think there's something that's very connected about reminding yourself about the physical world and doing things. This is why I got into engineering in the first place. So I'd probably say gardening is my favorite thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, best marriage advice.
I should have a better answer to this. Actually, I'm a little embarrassed right now. My mom is a psychologist, and she will not be super happy that I don't have the perfect answer to this, etc. Although my wife and I have now been married for over 23 years, so we're doing something. My best marriage advice is to just remember that it's not about you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's actually not about your spouse either. Exactly. It's about this thing that you're building together, which is a family, a household. Like it even beyond the relationship, I think what my wife and I were very aligned with, even from early days of dating, was this idea that we were building something bigger than ourselves. Whether you call it a home, a family, a household. So to me, I think the best marriage advice is just to remember that, right? Because it's very easy to get caught up in whatever little strife is happening that day. And usually it doesn't even involve your partner. Usually something else irritated you, like the wrong person parking the wrong way, or something that happened at work, or who knows what aggravations happened. Someone was wrong on the internet, right? I can't even tell you how many times my wife's been like, "Why are you upset?" I'll be like, "Someone's wrong on the internet again. I have to go fix that." So I actually like it. My best marriage advice is to focus on that thing. It's not you. It's not your partner. It's that thing you're trying to build together, and just remember that. You're doing it for decades.
I think your mom will be proud of that answer. Best part
Hopefully.
of being a parent.
I think the best part of being a parent is when you realize they're not you. It's a real gift to see how another human goes through life. And you have all this support. You have all these facilities and all these lessons, right? You have all these lessons from what you went through. Things that were hard, things that were easy, things that you loved, things that you hated. But when you realize that they're their own person, that you're actually you're not the main character in their story. They're the main character, right? Like you're helping them discover the world, build the world. And I know it sounds obvious because, if you have siblings, you're different than your siblings and you're different than your parents. We all try to form our own identities. We're proud of the ways that we're different. And somehow we get this amnesia the minute we have a child and think that they're going to be just like us in some way, but better. And I just love that. The best part of being a parent is discovering who your children are and helping them kind of grow and develop. At least for me, it is. Also for me, I'm, notoriously immature about some things, so it's nice to have a steady supply of children to play with who will like that Mario game, like the type of movies you like. But for me, the best part of being a parent is actually discovering who your children are and helping them be that person.
That's cool, Adam. Okay, what is something people might be surprised to learn about you? Don't say gardening.
Huh?
You can't say gardening.
Oh, no. It's funny. I come from professionally, I come from two different worlds, and so actually, it's interesting. When I hang out with my friends or the people I work with on engineering and technology, they're always surprised to find out that I do so much, or I'm so interested in these other topics. Whether it could be gardening, it could be finance, it could be these other topics, and the same thing happens the other way. I definitely felt like in my career, I've been a bridge always. Between engineers and non-engineers, people who work in finance and people who don't. And so I think I just like that role. But usually what people are surprised to find out is that there's some other side of my personality, other thing that I know. At work, what usually impresses people is when I know who the latest pop star is, etc. And of course, the credit goes to my 12-year-old daughter. I would not actually find these things myself. But there is somewhat of a shock when people find out that I know something like, whatever the new album is from Sabrina Carpenter and what song you prefer on it. It's a little surprising to people, but we're all people, right? We're not just one thing.
Yeah. I can still sing the Barney songs.
Right? Those cartoon theme songs. That is a little bit missing now. That's definitely a generational thing. Those cartoon theme songs just stick in your head. It's amazing.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, best part of being an uncommon philanthropist.
Oh, the best part of being an uncommon philanthropist, I think, is that it's just a wonderful area to be in. Just giving in general and applying yourself, even part of your time, to this problem of like, how do we help people give more, etc. has been just wonderful for me. I feel like I'm having so much more impact than I could just by myself, right? I have organizations I support, causes, places I volunteer, but it's so wonderful to build a platform that lets not just thousands, but hopefully eventually millions of people become philanthropists themselves to touch that side. For me, that's the best part.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. I need you to close us out. So my tagline is let go. Okay? As in let go.
All right.
So I need your best let go.
Are we looking for like a big scream? Or are we looking for...
How would you deliver... Tom Brady is very famous for his let's go,
Right.
Nobody can deliver that, but...
Right.
How would you say, like, if you're encouraging people to let go of that money, let's give, let's go, how would you deliver let go?
You don't want the easy one?
No, I want it to come from your heart.
Just let go. You'll feel better. Let go. Let go. It's not that hard. Let go. You'll feel better.
Let go, Adam.
You want the big scream? Awesome. You want let go?
Yeah.
Let go.
There we go.
That's good. I don't know.
That was good too.
It sounds better when you say it. A little bit.
Let go. Thank you so much for what you're doing, for your team at Daffy who've come alongside me and put some wind in my wings. It's gonna be a fun ride as we tackle this whole journey of generosity together.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your efforts. Certainly the campaign and your passion for the topic. I think it's wonderful. And obviously for anyone who's listening, anything that we can do in Daffy to support people giving or support your organization reaching people who want to give, let us know. That's what we're here for.
How can people find you?
We try to make that easy. So Daffy, easy name. If you go into the App Store, you can type Daffy into the Apple App Store. You'll find us. Or you can just go to daffy.org, and it's free to get started. Just a couple clicks.
Yeah. And give them a follow on social media, too. Your team does a great job.
Oh, of course. Yeah, we're just Daffy Giving on most platforms.
Okay, awesome.
Bye.
All right. Bye.
Let go.
Let go.